As I said, these are one of the classic female-male polarities. The dynamic in couples is every man and every woman has a Venus and a Mars. They have to be looked into together. Venus, again, tastes and values. The tastes and values determine who we will be attracted to, and then what strategy we're going to make up for ourselves to attract that person or that thing into our lives. And the energies of give and take, it's like an instrument, how we exchange feelings and intimate interactions with another person is also something we can see from the position of Venus in our chart. The style of emotional expression.
Great timing.
Well, okay. What is fun and what is pleasure? Well, for some people, this can be fun and pleasure.
Yeah.
For others, can be annoying. You know, which one you are is, again, down to your opinions most of the time, because it's the taste also about how we're having a good time. What do we understand by good time? For an air Venus, which we've seen an airly Venus, good time might be good conversation. But for a water Venus, deep emotional, intensive emotional exchange of feelings, which can be very non-verbal, could be a better time, having a good time, if I can say so. Mars is the physical energy, the sexual drive, but the drive, when they say drive here, it's kind of implied what you want. That's something very often misunderstood. The wanting is part of the Venus part of the story. Mars just makes it happen. So Mars is more like how.
It's your method.
Method. It's the method. It's the style of action. It's the style of how you would go out and do. And what's very funny is that one person can combine some very divergent energies in Venus and Mars. There can be a woman, for example, that approaches her looks and the way she attracts or the way she does things in one way that's through the prism of her Venus. But because her Mars is in some very, very different sign, for example, when one is very introverted or the other is very extroverted, that the woman can be very shy in her Venus expressions, which is the way she flirts, for example, the way she makes initial contact with somebody. But then when they're already together, when they're already intimate, that's when the Mars comes in play. And then you can be surprised. You can find something completely different as a temperament. But then it requires closed doors, or it requires already a field of action to be there and in place in order for the Mars function to come in play. Some people have them so well combined in their earth chart that they merge together. They may be in the same sign, or they can be in signs which are in the same element, or in the same, or kind of in an aspect that invigorates each other or makes it compatible to each other. Then the person on an individual level does have a big problem combining their assertiveness with their desires. They flow smoothly. But if there is a conflict, as is in the chart of Michael Jackson, for example, I don't know how this guy managed, and I've heard so many, obviously there was a big drama there on the field of relationships, as far as I know, very briefly. It's usually this sort of person doesn't know what they want, or there is on an internal level of confusion about either Venus or Mars. Either I want to attract a certain thing, but then when I do, I want to act differently, so I tend to attract people that respond to me well initially, but then don't, or the other way around. Or I have such a hard time to have the chance to have a close enough contact to show myself. That can be another scenario which this can show. All right, well, I thought this has a lot to do with it, which is why I'm studying this at the moment. Depth psychology, which is what this guy Carl Jung is very famous about, and lots of people nowadays that are studying psychology and helping people in therapeutic situations and so on. They are basing what they know on his study. He's a very famous psychologist, lived in the previous century, and he developed lots of revolutionary ideas for their time. Nowadays, not that revolutionary anymore. But what's interesting is that almost exactly they fit the concepts in psychological astrology. He studied astrology himself. He was very familiar. He said that he learned out of this a lot so that he can develop some of the principles he did. And one of the most famous principles is the idea about the anima and the animus. And I find it very, very interesting how that relates with Mars and Venus. Very simply put, the anima and the animus are the other face or the other side of everybody's personality. If you're a man, you have a feminine side, which lives in the subconscious. If you're a woman, you have a masculine side of your psyche that lives in the subconscious. And he was basically saying that one is usually less developed than the other, one is lived out more, while the other is kind of forgotten. By the way, I don't know if you know, but when a baby is still in the mother during the 9 months of pregnancy, the gender doesn't get determined until the 3rd month. So you have a baby that's in the mother in the first 3rd month that has equal masculine and feminine potentialities. It can be either, it can develop either into a boy or into a girl equally. And then something happens around the 3rd month of the pregnancy, which gives preference to just, hormonally on a body level, on, like programs this child to be then developing as a boy or as a girl. But the other side doesn't die. It's still always part of us, but because of social, roles of the way we are brought up, and actually not only, but also on the intrinsic, predisposition of the male and the female organism, which are, I believe, different. We cannot equate them. They are different. They have different dynamics, but we all have a so-called masculine side and feminine side inside us. So the anima is the woman kind of image. It's a soul image. It's a principle. It's nothing physical. That's more of a the passive side of a man's how can I say, character. And most men, even though now things are changing, have been brought up to act out mostly their masculine side, which is why in the times when Jung lived, it was very common for the anima to be subconscious in a man, and for the animus, which is the same principle in a woman, to be subconscious in a woman. And it's a lot, around this, which we don't have time to. But these are, to me, projected Marses and Venuses. What does it mean projected? When there is something inside you, and it doesn't need to be the Mars and the Venus, we all have something in our charts which we haven't developed very well or haven't connected very well with. And we tend usually, especially when it comes to Venus and Mars, they're mostly prone, those two functions, to that, to be projected to another person, usually the partner. And initially to the parents, but most usually the partner. So if I am a woman that hasn't developed her own Mars very well, my Mars is somewhere in a sign. I also, like every individual, have to learn how to fight for what I want, to assert my individuality, to do physically in the outside world different things. This is a human principle. It's not purely masculine or purely feminine. But I may be one of these women that has chosen, either because I've been brought up this way or because I just have developed that way, to not do that and expect another person, my partner, to do that work. So if I still don't have a partner, I may be choosing my approach to the people I would want to connect to, maybe motivated by the sign of my Mars, because I want this person I see. For example, I have a Mars in Libra. So I may tend to connect with a Libra man, or a man who has a Libra ascendant or something strong in Libra, because I may recognize in that person somebody who can fit the role of doing the job of my own Mars. But that's a projection. I would be very attracted to this person. He may be very capable of doing that job. And if we do combine in that way, and if he does do that for me, I would end up not having developed my Mars. So there is a dependency there. And if I don't get consciously in connection with my Mars and don't do certain things in my own life to, well, that person can still be with me and they can still do very well in that. But if I don't take the initiative at some point to do that, something will break up. There will be a challenge somewhere. There will be something happening at some point um, which will disturb the peace and quiet in the relationship. In another example, if a man projects his Venus into a woman, that happens all the time. Uh, the principle of beauty, balance, harmony, youthful appearance, which is more the Taurus side of Venus, will be projected into a woman. Whatever the sign of the Venus that man is, he would want either a very fiery, um, a fun woman, or one that's very, beautiful on a body level or whatever, or communicative. But if it's a projection, then there is nothing bad about having that taste, which ultimately Venus is about. Yes, I will have that taste, but my taste needs to be first related to me. I have to have applied my taste and my action with Mars and Venus to myself first. I must have developed my personality first, integrated it well enough so that I can be a good partner to another person. If I have not, and I expect that the other person will live out that part for me, that can happen for a while, but it will always break down if I don't do it for myself. Which is, yes, it is a generalization, but I think that's probably 90% the ground of all problems in relationships. And the other part is to do with energy inconsistency. Of two people having Venus and Mars, and we are just constricting our attention here into the intimate relationship, into elements: fire, water, air, and earth. All the signs fall into one of those four categories. This is energy exchange. The zodiac on an energy level, on exchange of electromagnetic fields. You can say it or imagine it in many different ways. But Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius are fire signs. If you have your Mars or Venus in one of them or both of them in this element, uh, the way you would want to attract or conquer whatever you want will be through the fire element. The fire element is related to intuition, the principle of um, energetically and enthusiastically expecting something good out of the future and wanting to participate in life rather with impersonally, in order to have a good time, in order to have new experiences, which will invigorate you. It's very actional. It's very not very down to earth. It's not. It's the opposite to practical. It's the opposite to sensual. It's rather imaginative. We are here in the realm of imagination. People with Mars and Venus in fire try to have perfect images in their minds. They don't try that; it comes naturally, actually, to have like idealistic images of the partner and try to find somebody to fulfill that idealistic image, and or somebody who would be doing things and being, giving them that good time and always moving. Aries, remember what I said about Aries, to some extent it relates to the other two, that this is the principle of constant action and doing something out in the outside world. It's extroverted energy. So they can be impulsive, direct, sometimes rude in their interpersonal relationships. They don't mean it. It's not bad. I mean, I don't want to present that element in a bad light, but it's just the way it is. It's not very sensitive to the feelings of the other side. It's rather concentrated into itself. The fire element tends to be a bit selfish. Which could be a good thing if that's what you are looking for. There should be people out there in the world that make it fun for others, isn't it? Or make it. Are you one of them? Yeah, but one of the problems this element has with the other elements, especially with water and earth, as you see, is the impersonality of it. They're not very personal. They can be with you, with others, but they don't mean to hurt other person's feelings. It's just that's not the concentration of their energy. It's more going out and living out the energy. Just the exact opposite to that is the earth principle of sensuality, groundedness, material world, living in the material world, um, being able to connect with nature and with the practical side of life. Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn are the three earth signs. And when Venus, I think by memory, your Venus was in Taurus. This may have connected you to this may have connected you with Taurian women, even though you are very airy. And elements attract each other because of their differences. They also repulse each other because of their differences. They're interesting, or you can see when you. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time, but there is a very interesting dynamic between the elements. If you don't know specifically about the signs, but you know about the elements, you can already figure out 90% of the energy dynamic. So here, the key point is, well, intimacy here in Earth is very practical, very like, I will do whatever I need to do for my partner because I know they have needs and I need to be responsible. That's not very romantic, isn't it? But somebody with Venus or Mars or both in Earth, or very earthly person as a whole, may have that attitude. And this makes intimacy very mechanistic with those people. It could not be very, but if they have a partner that wants that, there is no problem. So it's all about who you have on the opposite side. But they can be very sensual as well. Because this is a feminine, introverted energy, usually their feelings are hidden. They don't expose, especially Capricorn and Virgo. And Virgo can be very Puritan, kind of, in its ways. But yeah, hiding emotions. Then Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius are air, masculine, like fire, but masculine in an intellectual way. Speaking, communicating, exchanging, being interesting, having an interesting conversation can be something extremely stimulating for these people. They can prefer that than physical contact. And this can be so frustrating for others that want the physical contact. It can be extremely frustrating. Because for them, like it says here, intimacy is a dialogue or play more than anything else. Well, it's not completely excluded, but that's their concentration. They connect to the mind. They're very mental, these ones. Refined, aesthetic, ceremonial. This is to do more with Libra here. You see, Libra is an air sign, which governs Venus. And yeah, as I said, not particularly sensual or physical. But that's all right with some, not that much with others. It's good to know. All of this is just good to know when you are analyzing yourself and your partner. You don't, this myself has helped me tremendously knowing this information, because suddenly you start feeling normal if you have felt abnormal, and you start being more accepting to others and understanding to how the other person is, what they are made of. That's We all tend to think that others are like us deep down. Even if we see the differences, we kind of think, no, I'm sure that deep down they are all like me. No, that's a myth.
But also this projection evidence.
Exactly.
With the judgments that comes with it.
The projection is very common for everything, because we don't want to do our own job of developing ourselves, of going through difficulties, through crisis. We want somebody else to do the job. It's easier. So that's how projection comes forward. It's a mechanism. It's at the same time that same Jung was saying that projection is not something bad. It's a natural instinct of the psyche to project different things to not only people, but you can project to Donald Trump or your country's policies, or whatever. You can project to everything.
But it becomes a problem precisely because, as you said,
yeah, but
it doesn't resolve your conflict. So
it doesn't. But then because it creates a problem, it can give you a mirror. Because you have that complex or projection and you're struggling with it, you have a reason to see it. And then if you don't see it, it never becomes conscious, and you never have the chance to start working on it. Because there is no such perfect person born that doesn't have a complex or doesn't have a projection. We all have them. And the reason why we need each other is to be able to see them. The best sign to interact with, if you are a particular sun sign, is the opposite sign to you, because that's your perfect mirror. You have almost nothing in common, but you have the same goal as that sign, and he or she would be able to reflect you in the only possible way that you can see yourself. Yeah.
How do you know what your opposite sign is?
Every sign in astrology has its opposite sign. They come in pairs. Aries, Libra. So you see, Aries was the first sign of spring. Libra was the first sign of autumn. If you follow that, if you remember only that, you can figure it out yourself. Aries, Libra. Then what's after Aries? Taurus. What's after Libra? Scorpio. Taurus and Scorpio.
Yeah.
Then what's after Taurus? Gemini.
Okay.
So what will be the opposite sign of Gemini? The one that's after Scorpio. Which one is it? Sagittarius. So Gemini, Sagittarius.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Well, it takes time to
No, it
remember
does.
all this information, this terminology, but that's one way to, if you remember Aries and Libra, then you can pair them. But that's usually how it works. In astrology, in a birth chart, every two planets or factors that stand on opposite sides to each other are acting as mirrors. It's one of the 10 hard aspects called opposition among two. Opposition and square, they're these two. But they differ a lot. In many websites or, this common astrology, which I totally dislike because it can be so confusing. They can say, the same description for having Mars and Venus in square and in opposition. They give you the same description, regardless of whether the Mars and Venus are in square or in an opposition, because they are considered hard aspects. But the square is this crossing of paths. A sign that's a square to another sign is not the same effect as a sign that's opposite. Yeah, that's completely different dynamic there. So that's why I said, you can be, maybe the best way to learn astrology is through self-education and selecting yourself the information that resonates with you or you think is, or digging down the serious sources. I've been doing mostly that in the last few years, trying to distinguish what's the real thing from from the massive amount of information online, and lots of people that make videos or whatever that just want to satisfy your curiosity and give you a very, very generalized picture. You may walk out today more confused than not, but at least there is something out there, I hope, which is available, and if you're interested you can go. But if you don't go deeper, you won't be able to extract any real value for yourself. You may have a certain glimpses, but rather get more confused than not. Okay, finally, water. I already said a few things. Emotions. This is the realm of emotions, of interpersonal connection based on unspoken connection. Just because you have that intuitive feeling of and genuine interest in the feeling of the other person, where you can just sense it. Yeah, that the water signs are usually good therapists and good emotional helpers if they haven't sunken into their own emotions, which is what sometimes happens very often, especially with Cancer and Scorpio. But here, intimacy, passion, intimate relationship, a deep connection. Scorpio wants to merge with another so much that they can lose themselves. They can completely, the point there in that stage is to make a connection, and then you see what follows next, which is neither you and the other, it's something third. Yeah? But Scorpio is not the sign of sex. It's Taurus. That's another misconception. Because the way people think of it. On the physical level, it's Taurus. Because Taurus is the spring sign where everything in nature mates and then gets born out of that. It's the sign of the senses and all of that thing. Scorpio is an autumn sign where nature dies, where the leaves fall down on the ground and there is death after that. So why is it connected with sexuality? Because there are two parts, physical and psychological. Scorpio is to do with the psychological part, with the connection with another person, not because you want to have progeny, child. This is Taurus. Scorpio is not interested in that. It's interested in transformation. In this here, this quote from Jung: the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. So transformation is what actually Scorpio is interested in, is why relationships there are so intense and so dramatic, because they just get obsessed with the other person. That's one of the bad traits of that sign, that it can become too much, just too much concentration into that relationship. Or group rituals. It's also about group rituals and things like that.